Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today the video on the Krasny Kavkaz is a little bit late, and the reason for this is because I now have the IS-7. I decided to take the day to finish grinding the IS-7, and this means that I'm finally finished with the Operation Summer event. 5 days left, showing that the grind wasn't as bad as what some people were speculating. Overall, though, it is nice to have the IS-7. I will be looking at it in other videos, but this is just to say why the Devblog look at is a little bit late. On top of this, what we have is an unofficial patch notes from the main man, the myth, the legend, Mike 10D, and the changes seem to be ammo rack intensive. I also have the fan on in the background because it's bloody warm. The MPK PR122A, the MG ammo rack has been removed on it, so if you don't know what the MPK PR22A is, we can have a look for you. It is this bad boy right here, 2.0 in arcade, and there we go. So all of the ammo racks at the back, or at least one of the ammo racks, which is around about here, has been removed. At least it doesn't look like it's been removed, but it's still there on the model. Maybe this is for some other stuff. But anyway, the forward ammo rack merged into one ammo rack. This is for the Strongy, it seems. Or no, this is for the PR122A as well. So this has been merged into one. Supposedly an ammo rack has disappeared from here, but on the X-ray model it looks pretty much the same, unless these changes are coming over later. But yeah, the MPK is an interesting machine. No armor on it, so that's the biggest issue with it, and you're pretty much reliable on the 76mm. There's a lot of other Soviet vehicles which are a lot more fun. The BMO being one of them, the MPK 163 being the other, and of course some of the mighty other ones such as the MO4, which seem to have some ridiculously good armor. The Project 7U Strongy, which is the premium one, this 76mm, the 34K pitch speed has been increased by around about just over 3 times, showing that it is a quite large change. The 76mm, there's 3 of them on this, one at the back here, the auxiliary caliber as it's known. There's none on the front though. The other 2 are right here. So these are your 76s. These now have better rotation speed, which means that they'll be better at killing things on the move. The IS-7 has all of its camos added, so let's have a look at them for you while we are here. I'll just check the recording. Hello, yes, I look like ass, that's completely fine. It's one of those things. When you've been grinding all day, you generally don't look great. So this is the standard one that you get. Green, a little bit flushy, and then the winter camo, full white, with a little bit of green on it, and then forest camouflage is very much the same as the Soviet one, and it's 490 kills for that one. The winter one is 700, the bicolor desert 910. Crazy stuff that you need to do on the IS-7. Also, the tricolor summer camouflage, this is the one that you got from completing the 28, I believe it was, tasks at the end of the day. It's nice tricolor, you know, it's alright. With having an extra week doing the tasks, like, is it worth it? I mean, it's a nice skin. I'll probably use it over the default one. But yeah, so that is the unofficial patch notes from Mike 10D. So let's have a look at the main focus of the video. This is the Krasny Kavkaz. Now, if you don't know what this bad boy is, it is the top-of-the-line Soviet light cruiser. Every nation right now, US, Germany, and the Soviet Union, has a light cruiser, and this is the offering from the Soviets. A lot... sorry about that. A lot of guns, 480mm, 2 on the front, 2 on the back. You have 6 100mm dual guns, 2 76mm, 2 45s, 10 37s, and 2 quad 12.7 Vickers, and 2 Dishka machine guns, and of course the torpedoes, 6 on each side. This thing is an absolute monster when it comes to annihilating everything else, and the only thing that it has going against it is that it's not that fast, and it's also a large target. I think I would take those things over a destroyer, and the only thing, in my opinion, that this thing is going to be worse than is something that's put in the game which is bigger than it. And this is the major problem I have with naval forces right now. At least with the addition of the Soviet ships in the form of the ones that I've played, such as this line here, it seems like there's a little bit more emphasis on armor, there's a little bit more emphasis on APC-BC shells, and more of an emphasis on not as fast-firing guns. So there's at least a little bit of a change in the meta, but overall fast-firing, big penetrating guns is the way to go, apart from against the MO4, because it feels like the armor is just completely bugged on it. It's very hard to pen the side of it with anything. But with that said, it's a general trend when we look through naval forces, and the trend ends with the Krasny Kavkaz, which is why, for me, adding heavy cruisers, battleships, any larger ships or any smaller ships, it won't change the way that naval forces is. People will always just want to play the biggest ship, because at the end of the day, right now in the game, whoever has the most guns, whoever has the most burst mass, I think is the way to put it, burst mass per second, is going to win the battle, because aiming is something that can be tuned. There is no 3D element to it, unless you count the waves. The islands are okay, but when you look at the larger maps, which are designed for destroyers and light cruisers, there is no hiding from these behemoths, and they're just going to annihilate you, and it's whoever lands the first shot. If you're in a similar destroyer, and if it's a light cruiser versus a destroyer, well, the light cruiser just has massive inherent advantages. It reminds me of back in the day when we had when comparing a light tank to a medium tank, the only thing you had on your side as a light tank was that you had lower spawn points. And sometimes, in the form of stuff like the 906, you had a comparative gun. But everything else was against the light tank. They had to add in a mechanic in the form of scouting to make light tanks actually usable and interesting to play, making them different to the medium tanks. Now, the question is, are we going to see something like that in ships for stuff like PT boats, for stuff which isn't as good as their counterparts at that BR? And that is where I am interested in. That is where I want to see what comes out of it. It seems like they've been trying stuff with depth charges, trying stuff with different speeds of torpedoes, but overall, it just seems whoever has the more guns wins right now. Now, back to the Krasny. The Krasny has an interesting history. It's one of those ones which took a hell of a long time to build. I mean, we're talking about 10 years to build this machine. And then once it was built properly, it may even be 15 years. It got started pre-World War I believe in 1913. And then by the 1920s, mid-1920s, it was finally completed. It was then off its dry dock, so it was in the water, and it was clever enough to hit another ship. This means after repairs around about the early 1930s, it was actually kind of conscripted into the Navy, I suppose you would call it. So the Krasny has an interesting history when it comes to even not being in wartime. It's one of those ones where even before it was properly used in a naval setting, it had a bunch of issues onto it. Now, obviously, these issues aren't going to be shown in game, but it is definitely a history which should be looked at. An interesting one, to say the least, and I would definitely say go and do it. If I ever do a review of this machine, I will make sure to go through its history. So the Krasny Kavkaz is a Soviet-like cruiser of the Svetlana class, which were initially laid down before World War I for the Imperial Russian Navy, but saw completion and use under the Soviets. Captains will have the opportunity to try out the Krasny Kavkaz in one of its World War II retrofits in the closed beta testing of War Thunder naval forces. One of the things which is interesting is if we look at ships such as the USA one, the Trenton is a weird bastardization of two modifications or variants of the Trenton that I've seen. It isn't one which I can completely nail down. It's some kind of mid-1930s Trenton, but since it doesn't have its actual name when it comes to its year of birth, it's kind of hard to tell. because I can't find an actual Trenton with this specific set of guns. The Krasny is slightly different. The Krasny, this one definitely had these types of guns in World War II, and because of that, you have a 1930s Trenton versus a 1940s Krasny, and then you have a German, the Emden, which I believe is also a World War II machine. So you have all of these different eras intertwining, which I don't think is a bad thing. And the reason I don't think is a bad thing is because it should be balanced, especially in ships, where the time period for ships doesn't matter as much as it is for stuff like tanks. Like, we saw massive evolution of tanks from the year of 1939 to 1945. Even if you look at the Americans, you can see the whole evolution of the Sherman, you can see the whole evolution of their heavy tank projects. The tank destroyer doctrine just didn't exist before 1939. So all of these ideas were pushed forward in a very small space of time. Whereas with these types of ships, the light cruisers, as we saw with the Krasny, we're talking about a pre-World War I ship which kept getting retrofitted over time. Imagine if we took a Willy tank from Britain and we kept retrofitting it until 1939, and then that's what we used. That would basically be what we see in the form of the Krasny. And that is hilarious when you put it into that idea. So when we talk about historical stuff, you've got to understand that for Navy, it's a lot different compared to the other branches. In War Thunder, the Krasny Kavkaz will be the first Soviet light cruiser that participants of the naval close beta testing will have the chance to steam into battle with. Unlike other ships of the same class already present in the game, the Krasny Kavkaz features an odd combination of heavy cruiser firepower combined with light cruiser levels of protection and mobility. So, it's better than the other ships, is basically what they're saying here. And as I said, the more firepower, the better when you're with these vehicles. It's going to be interesting to see how torpedoes are actually used against these things, because the one thing that I have seen some success with at the higher tiers, when I've been playing battleship level, is taking stuff like the PR-1A3, and with its 2 torpedoes, and using it as a suicidal PT boat. Now, a lot of people may disagree with this idea and say, no, this is not something you should do, but it's the only way I can get these things to work against destroyers. Basically, just go head on into them, make sure that you're close enough to chuck torpedoes and kill the thing, but understand you ain't getting out of there, you dead. It's as simple as that. So, with that mindset, you can actually make these PT boats work, but you die. It's as simple as that. You are trading one for one, but you are trading a worse ship for a better ship, and I feel like that is how it's going to have to be seen when facing these destroyers and also the light cruisers head on. Unfortunately, if that isn't going to be the main thing that people are going to focus on, then you're going to have to get the USS Trenton, you're going to have to get the German light cruiser, or the Krasny is just going to annihilate everything. The fact that it has good protection and good mobility on top of the better firepower than the rest, let's just say, yeah, it's going to be a powerhouse. The feature that stands out most on the Krasny Kavkaz is its unusual primary armament. Namely, the Krasny Kavkaz is equipped with 4 180mm cannons spread evenly across the ship in single turrets. As these cannons are larger than the usual caliber of guns found on light cruisers, captains of the vessels can on one hand expect to deal a lot more damage to their opponents, but on the other hand should also be wary of longer reloads and the limited number of guns available. To complement the primary armament, the Krasny Kavkaz is also equipped with 4 dual 100mm secondary battery guns located midships. Due to their dual-purpose nature, these guns are capable of both engaging surface targets as well as enemy aircraft. However, the 100mm guns are not the only thing keeping the Krasny Kavkaz safe. Can we just stop saying Krasny Kavkaz? It's really hard to say. Safe from surprise attacks from the air and smaller vessels. To aid with this task, the Krasny Kavkaz is also equipped with 2 single 76mm, 2 single 45mm, 10 single 37s, 2 single and 2 quad 12.7mm caliber machine guns. And apart from this blistering array of guns, the ship also has the capability of launching torpedoes off to each side of the hull, thanks to 4 triple 533mm torpedo launchers. So with that said, what I think may be the way to go is for you to control the primaries to be able to annihilate other ships, and then set the 100mm to shoot other ships as well, and then let the other guns focus in the first 2 to 3 minutes of the battle on ships, and then swap them over to air cover. I think that would be the way to go with this machine. Basically, make it so it is great against ships at the start of the battle. Once you see aircraft coming in, switch your auxiliary stuff to aircraft, but I feel with the 100mm, you can keep them just attacking ships and make sure everything else is locked onto aircraft, because you don't need this much firepower to take out an aircraft. My experiences in ships, an LCS with the level of guns that it has annihilates aircraft that get anywhere close to it. So the Krasny with it, you're going to have to really hope that crew on the Krasny is awful, and well, that just doesn't happen when you get to that level. A fun fact, for her combat actions, the Krasny Kavkaz was awarded the Elite Guards title, making her one of only a handful of larger Soviet Navy warships that did so. Well done. In terms of mobility, the Krasny Kavkaz manages to reach a top speed of 29 knots, 54 kilometers an hour, thanks to the 55,000 horsepower that its turbines manage to produce. The armor protection of the Krasny Kavkaz is also comparable to similar ships already present in the game, with 76mm of belt armor and conning tower protection, and another 20mm forming the deck armor. This is something I do want to mention, and it's more of a general thing about the Soviet ships. What I've found is, when I've been grinding through the low stuff, like what I class as the gunboats, the subchasers and stuff like that, is a lot of the larger guns you start off with a HE shell. And this is harboring and annoying as hell. Now, as you can see here, with the MPKPR-122A, the 76mm, which is the main armament on this machine, you start off with a HE shell. It bends 8mm and it can't go through anything. But once you upgrade that to the BR-350A MD5 fuse with its 80mm, it becomes a one-shot machine. And it's one of those very odd things where, let's see, the MPK is the same with its 85mm. The PR-191M is the same with that as well. What I found is, in ships, the same with tanks, the fact that you can grind specific modifications to make your guns infinitely better still makes the case for the idea of changing the BR of a vehicle depending on what modifications you have installed. This is an idea I've bantered around with for at least a year, and I still believe it to this day. It's not as extreme in ships because fires can put themselves out. Parts are obviously still an issue, but at least fires are not as bad. But the fact that the HE shell on a lot of these Soviet ships is completely useless compared to the APC-BC or APHE they can gain, by getting the modification, should scream that a BR change depending on modifications is required. When we look at the Krasny modifications-wise, the 180, see, this is another great case of it. So, you start off with HE on the 180mm. Now, 60mm is a hell of a lot better than 8mm, but when we look at the 45 pens 3mm, so that's going to just be stuck shooting at aircraft. The 76 pens 8mm, the 85 only gets HE 26mm, so already all of these rounds are useless against other ships, and I'll tell you why they're useless. Let's look at the Emden, which is its main competition. Belt armor, 20, 50, 20 and 50 over most of it, and then 20 on most of its main compartments, 100 there, and then let's look at the Emden, the Trenton, sorry. The Trenton has belt 76 in the center, and so you can at least pen like these areas, and do damage, but in the center, where the engines are, no, you're not going through that at all. And since it's going to be looking at you like this, because that's where the majority of the guns are, then at least maybe you can pen it with the HE. But against something like the Emden, the Krasny is going to really struggle until you get that modification, until you're able to get this one, the 180mm B32. Because once you start firing with these, you have 349mm of penetration compared to 60, meaning that you automatically pen anything you look at. And it's just a really annoying that you have to get a rank 2 modification to be able to reliably pen everything. And this is the problem with the M46 Tier 4 Heat FS. This is the problem with the ST-A1 with its Heat FS where it is. It's really, the vehicle is balanced, so when it is fully upgraded, it is balanced. So when you're grinding out the modifications for it, it can feel like an absolute pain because you are nowhere near the level where you're supposed to be because of some of the decisions that have been made when it comes to the modifications. And the Krasny falls victim to this too, just like so many other vehicles in the game, and it's very sad to see, unfortunately, because HE is not the meta right now. AP, HE, and APC BC are. The Krasny Kavkaz awaits new captains in the closed beta testing of War Thunder Naval Forces, so don't wait around for too long. Raise the anchor and set course for battle. All hail, all hands to battle stations. What I would like to see is a discussion on the idea that whoever has the bigger guns wins. I want to see how this idea is fixed in the game, because as of right now, the idea has not even been discussed. So that is the main issue I have with these higher tier vehicles. It's nice to see light cruisers in the game. Do I think they solve a lot of issues? No, I think they just increase them, just like battleships, heavy cruisers, and also aircraft carriers would do, because the fundamental vision of the mechanics of naval emphasizes the fact that armor and firepower are massive compared to maneuverability, especially at the high tiers. But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day. I hope the i7 grind is going well for you. I am going to go rest. I'll see you next time.